Good morning. I'm going to try to wrap up defensive operations with the last one. I just want to say I forgot one element of offensive and defensive operations. You know, you got your armored units, your military engineering units, force recon units, logistic units, communications units, supply units, air units, divisional HQ, and operational reserve units. But the most important thing is the nursing units in the combat hospital. They're called CAS, Combat Area Surgical Hospitals. I was around a few on my tour in Iraq. I can't say what bases did the military security protocol, but I saw Air Force nurses not even bother putting on rubber gloves trying to stop a bleed out to save a wounded soldier. And your medical units are in the very rear, probably located near your division HQ. And on movement, they'll be, if you're moving forward, they'll be the last to move out with the division HQ. Or if you're in a retreat, they'll be the first to move out. But you got to get your wounded back, and you got to save what you can. They triage them. If somebody has less of a wound, they might have to sit and hurt. If somebody's bleeding out, they'll be getting taken care of first. Two people's bleeding out, and one of them's going to die, they're going to take care of the other one. I saw it firsthand. Those Air Force nurses are 110% my eyes, and I saw them do miracles under direct and indirect fire. So I definitely salute the Air Force nurses I saw in action on my tour. The last form of a defensive operation is an offensive operation gone awry. That means you've invaded a foreign nation, penetrated, taken land, run through their linear defenses, then they've regrouped, gathered, and countered, and en masse they're forcing you to backtrack. So you want to use those linear defensive lines they set up to your advantage, which means as you're progressing offensively, you don't want to destroy their defensive lines, because you might end up having to fight a retreat to the next backward line of defense that's already been established, which means usually you'll have your division HQ and your combat area surgical hospitals moved, supplies, everything moved, and you'll have a rear guard, which basically in conventional warfare is infantry, motorized infantry with some elements of panzer or tank weapons and artillery. But they'll be the rear guard while the Army group moves back to the next defensive line. Sometimes there isn't a defensive line to move back to, so that's where you go to your military engineers. Usually military engineers are up front creating bridgeheads at rivers or creating passes at mountain gaps, or doing multiple things military engineers do. But in a retreat, they'll be in the rear setting up a defensive linear line where you can try to hold there. You're losing ground loss that you gain, or ground gain you're going to lose, but you're gone from the offensive to the defensive like that because the enemy's regrouped, taking upon a different strategy, and has launched counterattacks against your Army group advancing. So the last defensive is actually an offensive going awry, and you go on the backtrack and retreat. And like I said, you don't want to destroy the defensive linear lines that the enemy already established. You just want to clear them out. That way when you fall back to them, you got something already built. If you got to fall back to nothing, you got to have pretty much 90% of your military engineers move back first with the division HQ, the cash units, and logistics and communications units, and they immediately start working on a new static defensive line to position yourselves against and try to hold that. You might have to fall back 5 lines and create 3 of them. You might be driven back out to your jump off point. That's where your offensive start is, called a jump off point. And you might be driven back further than that. There's no telling. A war's like gambling. It can change at the flip of a coin or the draw of a card. And that's pretty much the last defensive operation, is an offensive operation going awry and Army groups forced to retreat, give up ground gain, and take lost ground and lose it and retreat and backtrack and backfall. Like I said, you don't want to end up at your jump off point, but you know, like I said, it's a military saying, every plan goes wrong. So you want to be prepared. Like I said, you want to leave the enemy defensive lines you've overrun not destroyed, but mopped out and intact. And if there is a secondary line to fall back onto, if you're facing numerically superior odds, you're going to have those military engineers move back with the division HQ, cash units, supply units, logistics units, maintenance units, mechanic units, you name it, anything non-fighting unit, non-fighting personnel move back first. And some of them might even be recruited by the military engineers to work on a new defensive line, linear fortification, held by simple trenches like World War I, and fire bases every certain amount of clicks. If you're forced into a retreat fallback defensive operation, you want to shorten the width of your linear facing line and create depth. That'll save you from your army from being encircled in a pocket, is shortening the length of the defensive line and creating depth echelon wise. And you always leave an operational reserve unit, a hard punching unit, to punch a corridor out in case your army group is encased in a pocket. So you punch out with the hard hitting operational reserve unit. You move out all the units I listed, and you have a rear guard fighting action till you fall back to your next point. That pretty much wraps up offensive and defensive operations and warfare. I'm going to get down to tactical level next. That's what I like. And tactics probably will take a long time. Tactical level, it involves tricks, bluffs, you name it. It involves it. Yeah, tactical level's the lowest, but that's what wins a lot of the battles. So I'm gonna hit that next. That's the smallest of the 3. I said strategic, operations, tactics, but the tactics are the most to talk about. So I'll probably be talking about that, blogging about tactical level for a while, and then I'll hit the least known of my elements, and that's strategic, and that's because politics plays a part, strategies. Politics, in my opinion, has no correlation to military operations. You ask me right now, our government should be ruled by the military instead of crooked politicians. It'd be in a lot better shape. But that's an opinion. The rest was just educational. Y'all have a good hump day, and I'll discuss tactics next, starting next vlog.